The chamber fell into a silence so thick it felt as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Jasmine Crockett's eyes locked on the polished figure across the room, calm but burning with the kind of certainty that demanded attention. Every camera lens, every whispering aid, every spectator leaned forward, drawn into the gravitational pull of the moment. Then she spoke. One sentence, crisp, unyielding, enough to make the room tilt, enough to make history pause. Melania's smile, always rehearsed, always practiced for the cameras, faltered. Her hands, which had seemed so composed moments before, twitched against the papers she clutched like armor. A subtle hitch in her breath betrayed the first crack in a carefully constructed facade. The air, once filled with murmurs of expectation, thickened with disbelief. This wasn't just a debate or a performance, it was a revelation, and everyone in that room felt its weight. The cameras caught the flicker of doubt in Melania's eyes, the almost imperceptible shift in posture, the faint tightening at her jaw. For a second, she was no longer untouchable. For a second, the polished veneer wavered, exposing the vulnerability beneath. Reporters froze mid-scribble, interns paused mid-note, and senators exchanged glances that said everything without a word. A single line had transformed the energy of the room from controlled decorum into a tempest of tension. Every heart in that chamber raced, not from chaos, but from the inevitability of truth landing with full force. Crockett's voice, steady and unwavering, carried more than words, it carried conviction, lived experience, the kind of clarity that refuses to be ignored. And for the first time, Melania's defense, once immovable, seemed almost fragile, almost human. Outside the chamber, the world held its breath. Phones hovered midair, waiting for the viral moment that had already begun to ripple through feeds. Hashtags forming before the words even fully settled. This was a line that would be replayed, dissected, discussed, and debated. But this moment, this wasn't even the beginning. Because minutes earlier, Melania thought she had the upper hand until the truth surfaced. The morning sun had barely touched the marble steps of the Senate, when whispers of anticipation began to ripple through the corridors. Journalists leaned against railings, microphones poised, cameras primed, all sensing that today would not be ordinary. The committee room itself, usually a stage for routine hearings and carefully worded statements, seemed to vibrate with a rare electricity. Outside, social media buzzed with speculation, analysts predicting outcomes, citizens debating in real time. The air was heavy with expectation, a tension born not just of politics, but of something far larger: identity, fairness, and the possibility that the polished performance of power would finally be challenged. Melania entered first, her presence immaculate, every detail precise. The soft click of her heels echoed like a metronome across the room, a rhythm of control she had relied on countless times before. Her dress was impeccable, hair perfectly coiffed, lips curved in a practiced, diplomatic smile. Every move broadcasted confidence, rehearsed for scrutiny, designed to command the cameras and the audience alike. She carried herself like someone who believed the narrative was already in her favor, untouchable, untarnished, immune to scrutiny. Conversations hushed as she passed. Even seasoned senators, accustomed to the theatricality of political life, paused to note her composure. In that room, she was the standard of perfection, the measure against which anyone else would be compared. And then came Jasmine Crockett. Unlike her counterpart, she moved with understated poise. No flourish, no calculated gestures. Her calm did not announce itself with spectacle, but with an undeniable weight, the gravity of someone who had seen struggle, who carried responsibility not just for herself, but for those who demanded truth and accountability. Every step was deliberate, every breath measured, every glance forward filled with a quiet resolve that resonated deeper than confidence. It was certainty. The cameras captured it, the senators noticed, and the tension ratcheted higher. This was someone prepared to confront more than just a person. She was confronting an image, a system, a carefully curated narrative. The public had been watching for weeks, anticipating a moment where honesty would collide with performance. Op-eds debated potential outcomes, late-night commentators offered predictions, online threads speculated over who would command the floor. And yet, Despite all that preparation and pressure, no one fully understood the gravity of what was about to unfold. The stakes were immense. This was not merely a clash of words. It was a confrontation over representation, over who gets to define truth, over whose experiences were acknowledged and whose were minimized. It was about justice, fairness, and the reminder that even in the polished halls of power, integrity could not be faked. As the two figures faced each other across the polished table, the room seemed to hold its collective breath. The world outside, watching through screens and feeds, could feel it to a moment of reckoning, a shift in energy that promised to upend expectations. Every observer, from seasoned political analysts to the casual social media user, sensed that today something monumental would unfold. But what no one saw coming was how fast the narrative would flip and who would flip it. From the moment she first stepped onto the public stage, Melania had been the embodiment of polished control. Every gesture, every word, every smile had been carefully curated. A choreography designed to convey elegance, authority, and untouchable confidence. Cameras adored her. Audiences were captivated by the quiet, almost regal composure she radiated. It was a presence that seemed effortless, though it had been honed through years of discipline and careful observation. She understood the weight of image, the currency of perception, and she wielded it with precision. Public criticism, when it came, often bounced off her like water against glass. A misinterpreted comment, a harsh headline, a viral photo misstep, none of it penetrated the barrier she had built around herself. Critics would fire volleys, pundits would dissect, social media would erupt. Yet Melania would maintain the same composed smile, the same poised posture. Her public defenses were minimal but effective. A glance, a measured phrase, an almost imperceptible shift in demeanor was enough to silence doubt. People began to believe that she was not only untouchable but untouchably intelligent. A master of the narrative. Behind the scenes, her life was a network of meticulous planning. Every public appearance had been analyzed, rehearsed, and perfected. Every line she would speak, every angle she would present, had been anticipated and optimized for maximum effect. Confidence became her armor, and it served her well. Meetings with advisors, interactions with politicians, even casual encounters with the press, all were opportunities to reinforce the persona she had constructed. Her elegance wasn't just aesthetic, it was strategic, a shield against unpredictability, an assertion of dominance in spaces where so often she was underestimated. There were moments that revealed her tactical brilliance, instances where her calm and composure seemed almost supernatural. A misfired question in an interview could be deflected with a single, carefully measured smile. A sharp accusation could be neutralized with a tilt of the head or a pause. That suggested contemplation rather than defensiveness. She learned to turn scrutiny into admiration, to convert skepticism into fascination. People watched and wondered, how could someone maintain such grace under fire, time and time again? This rising confidence became self-reinforcing. The more untouchable she appeared, the more she believed in her invulnerability. Every polished statement, every controlled expression, every carefully choreographed interaction strengthened the idea that her narrative could not be challenged. She had built a fortress around herself, one constructed not of stone or steel, but of image, perception, and disciplined control. It was a fortress that seemed impenetrable, a persona that had never been publicly shaken. And yet, even within this carefully curated life, there were cracks unseen by the public. Tiny inconsistencies, small moments of hesitation, subtle shifts in tone or expression that hinted at the vulnerability beneath, but they were almost imperceptible, hidden under layers of rehearsed responses and strategic composure. To the world, she remained flawless. To herself, confidence was a necessity, a constant reassurance that the persona she projected was sufficient to meet any challenge. She had prepared for every question, every possible confrontation, every imaginable scenario. Her team had anticipated arguments, rehearsed rebuttals, mapped out potential crises. Every detail had been scrutinized, every contingency accounted for. And for years, it had worked perfectly. The world saw only the polished exterior, the quiet power, the unwavering elegance. Her reputation was a monument built on preparation, a testament to her ability to command the room without ever raising her voice. But she believed she had prepared for every question except the one that would expose the cracks. Jasmine Crockett's story did not begin in the spotlight, nor in the polished halls of power. It began in quiet neighborhoods where opportunity was scarce, and every day demanded a resilience that could not be taught in classrooms. She grew up watching families navigate hardship with dignity, listening to the unspoken stories of perseverance etched into every worn doorstep, every late-night conversation, every struggle to make ends meet. From those early days, she learned that strength was not measured in accolades or appearances, but in the quiet, consistent courage it took to stand tall when the world expected you to bend. She was underestimated from the very start. Teachers overlooked her potential, peers dismissed her ambitions, and the corridors of influence she aspired to enter seemed designed to keep people like her at the periphery. But Crockett possessed a kind of vision that refused to be constrained by others' expectations. She carried with her a belief in fairness, an unshakable moral compass, and a commitment to truth that would become her signature long before the world knew her name. Every setback became a lesson. Every closed door a reminder that preparation and patience were tools as powerful as ambition. Her journey through law, public service and civic engagement was marked by a quiet forcefulness. She confronted systems built to protect privilege, challenged narratives that ignored lived experience, and spoke truth in places where silence was expected. Each time she did so not with arrogance or spectacle, but with a measured, deliberate strength that unsettled those who had relied on polished appearances. To shield themselves, people began to notice the pattern. Crockett did not react impulsively. She did not rely on theatrics, but she always landed where the truth demanded she stand. The experiences that sharpened her insight were countless. She had seen polished defenses crumble under scrutiny, observed the subtle cracks behind confident smiles, and recognized the difference between presentation and substance. Through every debate, every negotiation, every confrontation with power, she developed an intuition that became nearly instinctual. She could see through rehearsed lines, through controlled expressions, and into the motivations and vulnerabilities that others sought to conceal. It was not a skill learned in books or classrooms. It was honed in the messy, unfiltered reality of a world where truth often hides beneath layers of performance. Crockett's belief in dignity and fairness was inseparable from her personal journey. She had witnessed the consequences of injustice, the silent erosion of opportunity, and the quiet triumph of resilience over circumstance. She understood that power could be both dazzling and deceptive, that authority could mask insecurity, and that courage was often invisible until it revealed itself at the decisive moment. Her approach was never to overpower with volume or spectacle, but to confront with clarity, precision, and moral certainty. In this way, she became a figure who could not be intimidated, a voice that could not be silenced, and a presence that demanded attention without needing to demand it. Alongside this moral grounding was an emotional intelligence that allowed her to navigate high-pressure environments with calm determination. She understood the stakes, read the room, and adjusted her approach without ever compromising her principles. Colleagues, constituents, and observers alike recognized that her composure was not weakness. It was mastery of self and situation. Every challenge she overcame strengthened her resolve, and every victory, no matter how small, reinforced her ability to discern truth from performance. Through years of struggle and dedication, Crockett became the kind of figure who inspired confidence not only through accomplishments, but through the integrity of her character. She carried the voices of those often ignored, the hopes of those underestimated, and the ideals of fairness and justice into every room she entered. Her journey had not been easy, nor had it been straightforward, but it had forged a resilience that would define the moments that mattered most. And it was that experience that lived truth that prepared her for the moment Melania least expected. Melania began speaking with the kind of measured elegance that had carried her through countless public appearances. Her words were polished, rehearsed, each phrase carefully chosen to project authority and control. She smiled often, the kind of smile that suggested confidence, charm, and an unshakable command over the room. Her tone was steady, almost soothing, as if the audience were merely spectators to her performance rather than participants in a confrontation. On the surface, she was untouchable, flawless, a figure whose composure seemed immune to scrutiny. Jasmine Crockett listened quietly. Not a flicker of distraction crossed her face, not a hint of impatience. Her hands rested lightly on the table, her posture composed yet purposeful. She didn't interrupt. She didn't react. But behind her calm exterior, every word Melania spoke was being measured, every gesture noted, every carefully rehearsed pause catalogued. Observers in the room began to notice the contrast. One woman radiating performance, the other radiating preparedness. Small signs began to emerge, almost imperceptible at first. Melania's eyes flickered briefly toward the committee members, a subtle search for reassurance that she did not receive. Her fingers tightened slightly on the edges of her notes, betraying the first hint of tension beneath the polished veneer. A whisper traveled across the room, a staffer murmuring, a journalist shifting in their seat, and yet the smile remained, carefully maintained. But the audience felt it, the first cracks in a carefully constructed facade. Then Crockett began. Her questions were precise, surgical, delivered without fanfare but with an unrelenting force. Each one punctured the layers of rehearsal, forcing Melania to pivot, to reframe, to justify, and to repeat. What had once seemed unassailable now required explanation. Crockett's tone never wavered. Her voice carried the weight of experience, the certainty of someone who had confronted polished defenses before and emerged unshaken. The room's energy shifted. The balance of power subtly but unmistakably moved. Witnesses whispered more frequently now, exchanging glances that confirmed what they could not yet say aloud. Something was happening, something rare and undeniable. The air, once tense but static, became charged. Senators leaned forward, pens hovering over notebooks, eyes widening at the precision of Crockett's inquiry. The press cameras captured every micro-expression, every flicker of doubt, every small tremor in the narrative that had seemed so secure. Melania attempted to maintain her composure, but the cracks widened with each carefully calibrated question. A pause grew longer, a smile stiffened, a gesture repeated too many times. The performance that had always commanded the room was faltering. Crockett's calm force, her quiet determination, was proving more persuasive than the rehearsed elegance that had carried Melania through every prior scrutiny. And yet, the most dramatic moment had not arrived. Every exchange built anticipation, every answer revealed vulnerability. Every subtle reaction amplified the tension. The room seemed to contract, the outside world leaning in closer, waiting for the culmination. Then came the question that changed everything, and Melania knew it. The room had already been tense, each breath weighted with expectation. Every eye fixed on the two figures at the center of the chamber. But when Jasmine Crockett rose to respond, the energy shifted. She did not move quickly, she did not rush. Every step was deliberate, every pause intentional. Silence fell like a wave, the kind of quiet that presses against the ears and demands attention. Crockett's eyes swept the room, calm and unwavering, as if she had already seen the end of this confrontation and knew exactly where it would lead. She began to speak, not with aggression but with precision. Earlier, statements were made, she said softly, statements meant to reassure, to present an image of consistency, of control. Yet when we examine them carefully, patterns emerge, contradictions that cannot be ignored. Her words were simple, almost understated, but the weight behind them carried an undeniable authority. Each syllable landed with clarity, exposing gaps that no amount of polish could conceal. The room seemed to inhale collectively, holding the moment, sensing that something irreversible had begun. Melania's eyes flickered. The first crack in the flawless mask. A practiced smile trembled at the edges, and for an instant, the confidence she had worn like armor seemed fragile. Crockett paused, allowing the words to settle, giving the audience space to absorb the implication. The silence stretched, and with each heartbeat, tension coiled tighter. Flashbulbs popped, capturing expressions that would later be dissected frame by frame. Journalists scribbled furiously. Editors whispered to colleagues, and senators leaned forward, all aware that they were witnessing a shift that would not be undone. Crockett continued, her voice steady, unwavering. Documents submitted, responses recorded, timelines established. They tell a story. One story aligns with the truth, the other does not. She held up the papers with subtle authority, not waving them theatrically, but letting them speak through their content. Every inconsistency she highlighted was meticulous, undeniable. Each gap, each contradiction. Forced reconsideration of the narrative carefully constructed to protect a polished image. Melania's hands tightened. Her posture, once fluid and confident, stiffened. A faint tremor in her fingers betrayed the strain of maintaining composure. She had faced questions before, certainly, but nothing that cut so precisely. Nothing that revealed weaknesses in plain view. Crockett's calm dismantling of carefully rehearsed defenses struck with the force of inevitability. It was methodical, deliberate, and impossible to ignore. The audience reacted viscerally. Gasps rippled across the room. Some leaned forward, unable to believe the clarity with which Crockett exposed the contradictions. Others murmured softly, sharing incredulous glances, whispering, "I didn't see that coming," or "She's right." The tension grew, amplified by the camera lenses that captured each flicker of doubt, each tightening jaw, each blink that betrayed disbelief. Social media was already igniting beyond the chamber doors. Live feeds broadcasting the moment to viewers who could sense that a critical fracture had formed in the carefully managed narrative. Then came the subtle, almost imperceptible emotional revelation, the inconsistency that could not be quantified on paper. Crockett's voice softened, but the impact deepened. And yet beyond documents and statements, she said, there is something more, an emotional truth that cannot be rehearsed, cannot be scripted, cannot be polished into acceptance. It is visible here, now, in the tension, in the hesitation, in the effort to maintain a facade. People feel it. I feel it. And this room feels it too. The words hit like a sudden, undeniable force. Melania's eyes widened, the practiced composure faltering further. Her lips parted briefly as if to respond, but no words emerged. The confidence she had relied upon, the armor of poise, had been pierced by the quiet, precise force of truth. Camera flashes caught every moment, the slight shift of her shoulders, the faltering of her smile, the tightening of her throat. Every observer sensed the transformation, the once unshakable narrative now destabilized in real time. Crockett allowed a pause, letting the moment breathe. Silence reigned. The audience leaned in, hearts racing, breaths held. Every word had landed with perfect timing. Each revelation compounded by the deliberate rhythm of delivery. She did not speak again immediately, because there was no need. The impact was visible, palpable, and sufficient. The room had changed in those few beats. And then she resumed, firm yet measured, amplifying the effect. It is not enough to present perfection, she said. When perfection masks the inconsistencies that affect real people, that shape real outcomes, the truth cannot be rehearsed. It cannot be edited. It reveals itself, and it demands accountability. That accountability begins here, and it begins now. Her gaze swept the chamber, making contact with every pair of eyes. The words were not just an argument, they were a declaration, a challenge, a revelation that left no room for retreat. Whispers erupted again, louder now. Some leaned back, shaking their heads in disbelief. Others nodded, quietly impressed by the composure and insight of the speaker who had just taken command of the narrative. Committee members exchanged glances, caught between protocol and fascination. The energy in the room had shifted completely. What had begun as a controlled exchange had become a reckoning. And the final blow, subtle yet devastating, came not from documents or statements, but from the controlled confidence with which Crockett delivered the truth she had long carried within her. She did not shout. She did not demand applause. She merely stood composed, firm, and unwavering, allowing the clarity of her insight to resonate across the room. The silence that followed was deafening, a collective acknowledgement that the polished defense, elegant and rehearsed as it had finally been pierced. Asterisk, and the moment her words landed, the room wasn't the same anymore. Asterisk, the moment Crockett's words landed, the world outside the chamber erupted. Social media feeds ignited in a torrent of hashtags and trending topics. Hashtag Crockett exposes. Hashtag truth of a fad. Hashtag moment of dignity. Memes sprang up almost instantly, capturing the split-second expressions. The subtle tremor in Melania's smile and Crockett's calm, unwavering gaze. Each post amplified the drama, spreading across platforms with the velocity of a storm. Each share carrying the emotional weight of the confrontation further into the public consciousness. Asterisk commentators scrambled to interpret the exchange, each voice adding a layer of analysis. Political talk shows paused other topics to dissect the moment frame by frame. Pundits, journalists, and analysts debated the precision of Crockett's questions, the psychological impact of her delivery, the subtle signs of vulnerability in the opposing defense. Clips were replayed endlessly, slowed down, highlighted, dissected for every nuance, every flicker of emotion. Headlines splashed across digital newspapers and news feeds alike. Crockett's calm devastates rehearsed defense, and the moment elegance met unyielding truth. Asterisk, fans of Crockett rejoiced online, their praise overflowing with admiration for her composure. Many marveled at her ability to confront power without aggression, to pierce rehearsed facades with grace and precision. Finally, someone who speaks truth with dignity. Read one viral post. "This is how real leadership looks," commented another. Videos compiled her methodical approach, the pauses, the deliberate phrasing, the quiet confidence that had unraveled weeks of meticulous preparation. The emotional payoff for the audience was immediate, a shared sense of justice, recognition, and validation that someone could stand firm against polished authority and win. Asterisk, yet the reaction was not uniform. Others were stunned, unsettled by the visual and emotional collapse of Melania's defense. Online forums buzzed with disbelief, viewers replaying the moment over and over, questioning how such poise could be undone in a single session. Some attempted to defend the narrative she had presented. Yet even those efforts often emphasized the dramatic impact of Crockett's performance, unintentionally magnifying the victory. The tension between admiration and incredulity drove even more engagement, ensuring that the moment could not be ignored or forgotten. Asterisk, the chamber itself remained alive with energy long after the exchange concluded. Observers whispered among themselves, recounting the precision, the timing, the courage it took to deliver such a confrontation with calm authority. Even colleagues who had once doubted the effectiveness of measured, non-aggressive debate acknowledged the power of Crockett's method. Every observer, from seasoned political veterans to casual citizens witnessing the viral clips, felt the ripple, an unmistakable recognition that something had shifted, not just in the room, but in perception itself. Asterisk, memes, reactions, and social commentary cascaded across borders, capturing international attention. Analysts in distant countries dissected the exchange, framing it as an exemplar of how truth can pierce even the most controlled public image. The story dominated morning shows, online news aggregators, and social media threads alike. Discussions did not merely focus on the content of Crockett's points, but on the artistry of her delivery, the rhythm, the timing, the quiet confidence that had turned a confrontation into a masterclass of emotional intelligence and strategic poise. Asterisk, public admiration intertwined with inspiration. People shared stories of their own experiences, drawing parallels to Crockett's ability to see through rehearsed facades and insist upon truth. Young professionals, activists, and citizens seeking representation and validation saw themselves reflected in her calm strength. The digital landscape became both a battlefield and a celebration hall of space, where critique met praise, where disbelief met awe, and where the resonance of a single moment expanded far beyond the chamber walls. Asterisk, yet, amidst the hashtags, memes, and endless commentary, one subtle shift caught attention even beyond the initial spectacle. A quiet ripple threaded through the digital chaos, almost imperceptible among the fervor of opinion and admiration. And in that moment, as observers continued to dissect, analyze, and celebrate, Crockett did something no one expected. Asterisk in the quiet aftermath, once the cameras stopped flashing and the microphones fell silent, Jasmine Crockett did something that no one outside that chamber could fully see, but everyone could feel. She reframed what had just occurred. It was no longer merely a confrontation between two individuals. It became a lesson in dignity, a demonstration that authenticity carries more weight than any rehearsed image, and that truth delivered with calm conviction cannot be obscured by performance or forward. Asterisk she reminded the audience, both inside the chamber and beyond the screens capturing every frame, that arrogance, no matter how polished, ultimately falters against integrity. A carefully curated image may impress at first glance, but it cannot withstand the scrutiny of lived experience, careful observation, and unshakable moral clarity. In that moment, Crockett's victory was not just political, it was symbolic. It was a reminder that power rooted in posturing is fragile, while strength built on authenticity endures. Asterisk her words carried a universality that resonated beyond politics. They spoke to anyone who had ever been underestimated, dismissed, or silenced. They were a reminder that fairness, justice, and honesty are not privileges granted by circumstance or status. They are responsibilities embraced by those willing to stand firm, to speak clearly, and to act with integrity. Crockett's example became a mirror for the audience, a reflection of what is possible when courage and principle guide action. Asterisk. She framed her triumph not as personal glory, but as a testament to collective aspiration. This isn't about one debate, she said softly, her gaze sweeping across the chamber. It's about the idea that dignity belongs to everyone, that America is at its best when truth is upheld, and that fairness is not reserved for the powerful, but for every voice willing to demand it. Her message transcended politics. It was aspirational, inclusive, and grounding a call to recognize the potential within each individual to challenge falsehood, to confront pretense, and to insist on accountability. Asterisk the crescendo of values was unmistakable. Hope, unity, service, justice, and transparency were no longer abstract ideals, they were palpable, embodied in the deliberate, composed actions Crockett had demonstrated throughout the confrontation. Viewers could feel the weight of her example, that integrity is not performative, that leadership does not require spectacle, and that every individual, when guided by principle, has the capacity to enact change. Asterisk even as analysts, commentators, and the public continued to dissect the moment, the moral lesson remained clear. Crockett had not only exposed inconsistencies in a carefully rehearsed narrative, but had done so in a way that elevated the conversation. She reminded everyone that power is fleeting, performance is temporary, but character and principle endure, and by doing so, she offered a model for civic engagement, for personal conduct, and for public service that transcended the moment itself. Asterisk her victory was subtle, yet profound. It lay not in dominance, not in spectacle, but in the demonstration that steadfastness and truth can reshape perception, even when the odds seem stacked in favor of those relying on image alone. In the minds of those who witnessed it, the lesson lingered: dignity over arrogance, authenticity over image, and truth over rehearsed narratives. Asterisk, and that's why her message still echoes. Asterisk the room had emptied, the cameras had stopped rolling, and yet the impact of that single confrontation lingered like a pulse felt far beyond the chamber walls. Jasmine Crockett's calm, unwavering insistence on truth had dismantled a polished defense that once seemed untouchable. What had begun as a rehearsal of image and control had ended as a revelation of character, a vivid demonstration that dignity and authenticity cannot be manufactured, only lived. The lesson was clear. Arrogance may impress briefly, but it falters under scrutiny. Rehearsed narratives may captivate the eye, but they crumble under the weight of evidence and principle. And in every heart that witnessed the exchange through screens, feeds, or whispered recounting the value of courage, clarity, and moral conviction resonated. This was more than a debate. It was a reminder that truth has power, and integrity has consequences that ripple far beyond the moment they are asserted. Now, the question becomes, What do you do with that knowledge? How will you carry it forward into your own life, into your own community, into the conversations where courage is needed most? Crockett's example challenges us all to stand firm, to speak clearly, and to insist on accountability not just from others, but from ourselves. So stay aware, stay vigilant, stay empowered. Let the moment remind you that no amount of polish can substitute for principle, and no facade can withstand the quiet force of truth. Subscribe, share, and let this story inspire action. Stand for integrity, demand fairness, and never allow arrogance to go unchallenged. The world changes when courage meets conviction, and the ripple begins with you.